All right, we're live now.
Excellent. Way to go. Way to
Excellent.
go. Way to go.
Yes, yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Hello, hello. You can take a moment to introduce yourself. Let us know where you are. I see we already have 10 of you joining. Interesting. So take a minute, introduce yourself, and we shall get started shortly. So let us know where you're joining us from. And remember, if you have a question, do not hesitate to ask your question. All right, all right. Introduce yourself, where you're joining from. Okay. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. We're thrilled to have you with us this special event. This is going to be an insightful conversation on developing your export strategy. And today I have a special guest who's going to be having a conversation with me. Our focus today will be on the value chain and its pivotal role in shaping robust export strategies. We would aim to shed light on the abundant opportunities in and around Africa, particularly for our African American, Black, and Caribbean communities who are usually with people of African descent. My name is Bengal Matayo, and I'm thrilled to introduce my special guest who is not just dreaming about Africa's economic future, but actively shaping it. Candy Johnson is a champion for African prosperity through strategic product and value chain development. He's a distinguished international economic development authority. He has championed value chain development with over 2 decades of experience. He has designed and implemented transformative projects to promote profitable value-added export trade. Ken expertise includes business and private sector development, compliance, risk management, and marketing. He has led significant initiatives at the African Development Bank and is a principal at Devconia LLC. Ken shares his insight through consulting services to government, companies, and individuals and through speaking engagement. So, as you can see, we've got a stimulating conversations ahead. So let's dive in. So let me ask my guest to take a minute to introduce himself. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you very much, Benga. Appreciate being here. Good morning, good afternoon to all. I'm thrilled and I'm excited to be here and to join you all here. Just a brief overview of myself. I'm a native of Sierra Leone, West Africa, but I pretty much grew up in New York in the United States, and went to high school, college, and I worked there extensively. I've worked for leading consultancies in New York, specifically Ernst& Young, Accenture, PricewaterhouseCoopers. The last two, I served in an executive capacity, but I've always been drawn throughout to Africa's development. So I started my own firm and then Devconia, and we're working with various African governments, companies, and individuals as well. Then I consulted with the World Bank in Washington, D.C., again around value chain. And after that, I came to Abidjan to shepherd value chains within the African Development Bank. And one of the notable projects I worked on was a $1.2 billion financing for both Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, which are the two largest producers of cocoa beans that then gets transformed into chocolate. So I'm a strong proponent, champion of the importance of value chain. And I've always said this, one of the most important thing within the African context is that we have neglected value addition. We send our raw materials, our products unprocessed onto other countries. And by so doing, we are effectively transferring wealth, transferring jobs to the rest of the world. And there has to be a course correction there if we are going to move further as a continent and develop the continent as much as we should. So that, in a nutshell, is my introduction. And I'll be open to any questions, and we'll speak further on this topic as we move further along.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much, Ken. This is awesome, awesome. So, ladies and gentlemen, I mean, you can see and you can tell that this is going to be a fascinating conversation. You see, Africa is a continent endowed with vast natural resources and untapped potentials. However, as Ken had alluded to, translating these assets into sustained economic growth and prosperity for the people has been a persistent challenge. So today, Africans stand at a pivotal crossroad, and the key to its future prosperity, like Ken said, lies in value chain development and the establishment of value added processing factories, a precursor to industrialization. So, absolutely, Africa's wealth of natural resources is immense, but the real challenge is converting this into long-term economic growth. So, Ken, let's kick things off in the
Mhm.
most basic term. What is value chain development?
Yes, thank you very much for that, because I think that's a very good point of departure. Now, value chain, right, is the post-harvest, if we're talking about agriculture. So let me just take a step back and say that value chain is comprised of two major components, right? So we're looking at first what we call soft commodities, and soft commodities would refer to agricultural commodities, soft commodities, and the hard commodities are primarily regarding our minerals, whether it be bauxite, gold, diamond, etc. Now, so value chain is post-harvest or post-mining value addition. So there are constituent parts within the extraction of a soft commodity or a hard commodity and the end product, which goes to the consumer. So value chain simply means, in very simple terms, the various components that adds value along the way until it gets to the final consumer. So, for example, if we're looking at the manufacture of chocolate, right? Now, chocolate emanates from cocoa beans. Once we have the cocoa beans, then they have to be dried, then after they're dried, then they have to be roasted, they have to be mixed, they have to be turned into cocoa powder, cocoa butter, and then we finally move on to chocolate. So there are various parts. Each one of those parts adds significant value to the end product, which is chocolate. Now, what we do in the continent is that we tend to export, for example, the beans, as opposed to the cocoa powder, as opposed to the chocolate itself. So that, and we can do that with several other products. We can look at minerals, whether it's diamond or gold. We can start by smelting it. We can start by maybe beginning to produce Africa related jewelry that I think would have a significant draw and pull in the foreign markets. So simply placed, value chain is the subsequent value that is added onto raw materials that moves it along the way, along the path of value towards the end product.
Great. Thank you, Ken. So, in a layman's language, so let's say we're taking cocoa, like you said, right? So, the process of adding value to your cocoa, either you powdered it, you packaged it, or
Mhm.
you make it into chocolate, or you make it into something else that would allow more people to work on the production process
Right.
and then you now selling it out so you can sell to more buyers rather than just selling the cocoa. So that's basically value chain development. So my question is this, Ken. A lot of people that will listen to this conversation, they are just starting out in expectation. And it may just be that's all they know. The strategy may just be, let me sell cocoa, let me sell cocoa. Who will buy my cocoa? How can I sell cocoa? What should they be aware of, or what would you tell them right now as they're putting together their export strategies to they want to sell cocoa overseas? What would you tell them to do as part of their export strategy so they can be part of that value chain development?
Excellent question. So, and that's a very good question. So, if we're using cocoa beans, which is what I guess we're referring to here, if we're using cocoa beans and you are somebody in Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire, where those two countries, by the way, Cote d'Ivoire is the largest producer of cocoa beans. Then next to that, it's Ghana, right? Understand that those two combined countries produce about two-thirds of the world's cocoa beans that goes on to manufacture chocolate. If we were to add other West African countries, namely Cameroon, Nigeria, cocoa beans, 70% of cocoa beans in the entire world emanates from West Africa. The very troubling statistic is that the cocoa bean, the chocolate industry is a $130 billion annual revenue. $130 billion annually. Of that amount, West Africa gets less than 5%. Now, that is a very chilling statistic. Now, that
It's
can be
crazy.
changed. Yeah, absolutely. That can be changed. And the change, and this is why I mention this, because to your question, it dovetails with your question. If somebody is in any of these countries, and again, this can be applied to cashews, it can be applied to any other agricultural product. Typically, there is a tenfold increase in value from when you unearth the product, whether it be cocoa beans, whether it be diamonds in Sierra Leone. There's a tenfold increase before it's transformed into the end product. So if you have something that's $10, it was unearthed at $10. By the time you transform it into the final product, it is now $100 minimum. And there are so many others that it goes into like 10, 15% value addition. I mean, not percent, 15-fold value addition. So in that case, a $10 product that you unearthed, at the end product now, it's worth $150 if you look at the 15 times increase in value. So somebody who is in this area, and I've said this, and this is a very compelling thing that I say. You know, Africa's quote unquote poverty can be really distilled into one specific area is that we have the raw materials, as you mentioned, Benga. We are endowed with significant raw materials. So, when measured by raw materials, Africa is by far the richest continent in the world by natural resources. When we look at the GDP, that's just a fancy word, the gross domestic product, that's just a fancy word to just basically say that what is the total value of the production in a country? That measures the country's wealth. Okay? So Africa then becomes the last of all the continents. And the reason for that is that we produce very little. We have the raw materials, but then we export it in very low value that is ascribed to raw materials,
And
and then we allow it to be processed elsewhere. Go ahead, Benga.
would you blame the exporters or the entrepreneur, the small businesses trying to find opportunity for their product to grow beyond their country to earn in foreign exchange? Would you blame them if I mean what should they do? What should these people listening to us do right now? Because they're all in this situation. There are very few of them that can add value by their own resources to this product. All they have is the raw material and they
Mhm.
have to do business. So what should they do? What do you think they should do? What can we do at this
Okay,
point?
good question. So the first thing to do is to understand what is the next level. When you export it, right? Um, what is the next value added work that is done on the product? So it would vary from different products. Okay, so obviously, if we're looking at cocoa beans, we know that the next step, the next major step after you unearth, you've harvested the cocoa beans, the next step is to have it dried. And I think a lot of them are dried on the continent. That's not a
Yeah, they
problem.
mostly
Again, that's
export dried and
yeah,
sometimes powdered. Yeah, it's already
exactly. And
been
yeah, that's still
grounded.
very low value. And that's a low. The real value now begins with the roasting. When you do your research, right, understanding again the value added after post harvest, I mean post export, what are they doing with it? And why can't I do it here on the continent? I mean, that is a fundamental question you must ask yourself. So then let's stick with cocoa beans. Then, if the next product, the next value chain addition is roasting, okay, then the question then becomes, okay, where do I find roasters? If I can roast the beans in Africa, in parts of wherever I am, whether it be whether it be Ghana or Cote d'Ivoire or Cameroon, then why can't we do that? Then how do I then gain access to roasters? Hmm? And from that roasting now, which would then employ a lot of people on the continent, you have
But
then
if
added
they don't have the
value.
resources, sorry, what if they don't have? I understand we're talking to two categories of followers here. Some can well afford to do all of this. But what about those who don't even have the resources? All they have is what they grow. They grow cocoa and they harvest the cocoa beans. They dry the cocoa beans in the sun. That's how they
Mhm.
practically dry them. And
Yeah.
then they're ready to sell it off.
Yes.
So I think we should pivot to how can they form that cooperative or association to influence the government to
Mhm.
look into this because the government knows, but the government is not necessarily doing providing the resources or infrastructure for say to roast or to make chocolate.
Right. So you're absolutely right, Benga. So there are two components of this, right?
Okay.
Now, we need to do a couple of things. We need to protect African farmers, and by that I mean we
Okay.
need to ensure that they are not price takers, but in fact price makers. Okay, and right now they are price takers. So whatever the huge chocolatiers say they want to buy the beans for, they have very little say. They don't have storage facilities. They don't have a way to process it so that it can have a longer shelf life. They know that if they don't take the price that is given to them, they lose out. And the folks out in the rest of the world know that, and they're taking advantage of a lot of African farmers in that way, which ends up with in them, A, not being able to afford just basic subsistence living, right? But then, they are working so hard and have no control over the price of their things. So if we are adding value locally, automatically we become off takers, meaning the person doing the roasting, right? The Nigerian, the Cameroonian, the Ghanaian, right? We are creating a market for the farmers. And now and so I'm not necessarily saying the farmers can now become value added roasters because that may be a different skill set. Yeah? But it does help the farmer in that they don't have to just take whatever is given to them by the world price because the demand locally is there for them to sell their goods at a decent level and have a decent wage. But to your point, Benga, so what do you do as an individual, right? So either you coordinate with farmers so the farmers can give you at a very low price, but then the farmers can then profit on the value addition. So there are a number of ways you can work it out, right? Or you can buy it outright from the farmers, which also helps them because they have a local market for their products. That is also extremely important. But now, if you are now in that sort of a value-added processing division of this equation, then what you want to do is, like you said, number one, you have to petition your government to try to support value addition by, doing a number of things, providing, because a lot of countries have development banks of their own, right? To see how they can give you, through their development banks, how they can guarantee loans that you can get from local banks, right? And of course, externally, right? There are lots of foundations and organizations that, if you have a good idea, a good plan, that would be able to help you to raise the capital, assuming that you're starting from zero, but you do have this, because what you're telling them is you have access to very high quality cocoa beans. We know there's a market, right? And the cocoa market, I guess, is increasing at least by 4.5% annually, right? So we know that it's a stable and it's an upward trending market. So it's just a matter of now looking at all of these components now in terms of getting the financing, again, through local governments, through local banks, through government guarantees, through foundations, and just also venture capital, writing good plans. There are several venture capitals in Africa as well as in the United States. So those are the ways that you can then pull money together. And then once you get started, I think I've
Right.
mentioned this to you earlier,
Yes.
my policy in life is think big, start small, scale fast. Think big, start small, scale fast. You will get there. Yeah. So the
So
roasting now creates added value that you could then move forward with.
can you repeat that? Grow big,
Think big.
think big,
That's the first one. Start small
start small,
and scale fast.
and scale fast. I love that. Thanks for sharing. So, folks joining us, I'm sure you've been excited and you enjoyed this conversation. If you have a question, drop your question here and I'll try to get Ken to answer your question. So, Ken, let me ask you, how is value chain development a great opportunity for Africans in the diaspora?
Here's
Folks
what
who
I
don't
say.
live, okay,
Mhm. I'm sorry, go
yes.
ahead, finish it.
No, no, that's the question. How does the
Here's what I
folks outside take
here's what
advantage
I
of
say.
this? Hmm.
Here's what I say to Africans on the continent, Africans, the diaspora community, or even just non-Africans. The fastest way, or one of the fastest way to the prosperity of the continent is through value chains, right? Because that is, like you said, a precursor to industrialization. But I also say this, value chains, right, are the fastest and most stable way to build personal wealth, personal generational wealth, right? Because the raw materials are there. You don't have to fly to Europe or India or Southeast Asia or whatever. We are endowed on the continent with a lot of natural resources. Now, leveraging that resource intelligently in a way that adds value is a significant path to personal wealth as well as continental wealth. That's why it is extremely important. You're doing a fabulous service, but guess what? You're doing it on the continent. You are creating jobs locally. It always pains me to hear about the people who are drown, trying to leave Libya to go to
Right.
southern Europe. I mean, it's just heartrending when we as a continent are exporting these jobs that they're going and dying for in another place. It absolutely makes no sense. And that this can be changed. The paradigm can be shifted in a way that Africans benefit from their own raw materials, but we've got to have the foresight. We have to have the will to ensure that nothing should be leaving the continent in its raw, unprocessed form. And there are countries, I believe Uganda has passed that law. I believe Ghana had said that they're not going to be sending their gold unless it's been processed locally. So I'm seeing very positive trends towards value addition, but it is essential not only for the continent, but for you personally. It's like doing good and doing well. Okay? Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Now you're apt on this, but you see, in my own journey, what I've seen is, like you rightly said, countries across Africa are saying we do not want to export raw materials. We want to add value to them. But here is the challenge. Take, for example, a country like Nigeria. The
Hmm.
NEPC, which is the Nigerian Export Promotion Council,
Okay.
their goal is to diversify from oil to non-oil export,
Right.
add
Hmm.
value to them, and they're training entrepreneurs across Nigeria. They're creating product, they're adding value to those products to consumer packaged goods.
Hmm.
Now, the challenge is there's no market for those. The market is there, but they have not created the market for them. There's no retailers other than the local African market, which everybody is running to. How many of those value added products have you seen in Walmart? Have you seen in Costco? Have you seen in all these big retail chains across the United States? So that is a challenge right there. The government is doing the right thing by saying we do not want to do this. However, how are they opening the market? For someone like me, I'm a practitioner. I do all I can to help Africans get their product to market. But there's a role that the government is expected to play to support people like me to be able to make African product access the market. But they're not even talking to me. They're not even talking to people like me. So whatever we do on the level of private sector. And these private
Right.
sectors, they do not have the resources and the access of the government. How can the government do a little bit better? Because still talking about the diaspora, it makes it makes absolute sense for them to partner with people like us here, right? Because nobody is going to fight for Africa. We have to fight for ourselves. The
Correct.
Chinese, the Indians, they are all the Spanish, they're buying our products, they're
Right.
packaging our products, and they're
Hmm.
taking it to their own sort of storefront because they have access to consumers because they have their retail stores. But we
Hmm.
as Africans, aside from the local African market, we do not have access to those mainstream. So what do you think? I don't even want you to answer a question. I'm just sharing my opinion, and I would like to hear your own take about
Hmm.
this.
No, you're right on point. You're absolutely right on point. So there's a role for the government and there's a role for the private sector. From the government perspective, I think that government should ensure that there is ready and easily accessible capital, right, for the development of these products. Now, one of the other things that governments must do is that African products sometimes, get a harder time in accessing international markets. They sometimes put burdens on African products and that sort of stuff. Some of them are legitimate, some of them are not as legitimate. Some of them are protectionist in nature, meaning that they're trying to protect their own local market. But by and large, every embassy in the world, African embassy in the world, should have a functioning, and that's a critical word, a functioning commercial attache that will be engaging the countries, where they are to ensure that the market opens up for their country's product, right? And they should be engaging them on a regular basis. It's not only engaging, because I'm most familiar with the United States, but it's not only engaging the Department of Commerce, right? It's not only engaging the U.S. Import-Export agencies, it's also engaging chambers of commerce within the United States. It's also engaging large commercial buyers, right? And this is what I think, why I believe that a commercial attaché, which is usually the term within an embassy, is such a vital role in the economic development of their own country. So these are some of
Wow.
the things that I think needs to be addressed.
Thank you, Ken. No, absolutely. I totally agree with you. The commercial service, they have
Mhm.
representative in every American embassies all over the world.
Mhm.
And you would see them being the one organizing meetings, connecting businesses in the US with those in Africa. And if you come from the US now to Africa in any of the embassies, you would probably have meetings at the embassies. And so why can't we do the same? You're right.
Exactly. Yeah.
The there is a consular on trade in
Mhm.
all African embassies in the US and the
Mhm.
consulates. I tell you, with my own personal experience, without
Mhm.
throwing anybody under the bus,
Mhm.
A lot of the council on trade, they are ineffective and inefficient. They don't
Mhm.
know what they're supposed to do. Either they do or they don't want to do. So for
Right.
many people listening to this conversation, it's out of passion that we're saying this. Our
Right.
government are not doing a great job. You need
Mhm.
to, those of you who are influential or who can speak up, let the government know that many of the consular on trade, they're not
Mhm.
doing the right things. In fact, we've had situation where we invited a consular on trade with an embassy to come and represent their country and meet buyers of African products. And the first thing they said is, we don't have money. We're not
Ah.
coming. And we
Mhm.
said, we don't want you to pay money. Just come and speak and showcase what your product country has
Right.
to offer. So
Mhm.
thank you for sharing that. Wherever you are, you may be listening, you may have the ear of your government. Let them ensure that these changes we're talking about start with what Ken said. Having the right rep here who can advocate for your country, for your products. Amen. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Benga, is that having these positions, and that's why I used the word very advisedly. I said functioning commercial attaches, because they need to be functioning. They need to be extremely active, right, in terms of championing, in terms of advocating for products. And again, there are numerous channels, chambers of commerces, again, large, huge retailers. There are lots of ways you can do that. And I think that is such a critical function, but it must be functioning. It cannot be, oh, I'm in the United States, I'm just going to go do shopping or something. It's they really got to like really focus. And I believe that if I were advising any of these people, I would say, look, you should start off the year with a timeline that by the end of this year, we should be getting X amount of cocoa beans into this country. Or actually, I take that back. We should be getting an X percentage of processed, X amount of tons of processed. Um, it's cocoa powder, it's cocoa paste, but some value addition done in the country. And then, but when you have those specific goals in mind and specific timelines attached to these goals, then you can see significant progress.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate the feedback. I'm going to quickly take a couple of questions here. So, Margaret is saying, so I guess she just wanted to be sure what you said was think big, start small, and scale fast. Not
Yes,
first,
yes,
fast.
Margaret. Yes, Mark, and that's exactly what I mean. So, what that means in practical terms is that you should always be thinking big. But when people think big, they think it's almost unaccomplishable, right? And that's not the case. It's fine to think big. That's where good ideas, big ideas, innovation, and growth come from. So you've got to start by having a big, grand idea, right? So that's the think big. Start small, meaning that if you're waiting to go in and start, with like $100 million company in the first year, it's likely not going to happen. Well, that would depend obviously on your resources, but that is for many African businesses that is not likely. So it is okay to start small. Again, we're thinking big, but we are starting small because this is what we can do. But you'll be amazed at once you start something, how quickly it can grow. So the scale up. So thinking big is necessary. Starting small, which is a very practical thing, right? And then scaling fast. Essentially, that means growing very fast. Once you get started, try to reinvest your capital into your business, try to grow your business, try to partner if that is necessary to scale up your business production units. So think big, start small, scale
And scale
fast.
fast. Thank you, Ken. And again, Margaret, just to add to what Ken has said, you see, thinking big, starting with having a plan. You need to have a plan. So today, all you can do is sell your product within Africa. But thinking big is when you say, let me go get the FDA approval for my product so that when I see opportunity to export to the US, I'm
Yep.
able to do that. Thinking big is saying, even though I do not have buyers in the US, let me get my product organically certified. so that
Mhm.
when I see, just like last week, someone was looking for, I can't remember what the product is, vanilla. Someone was looking for vanilla with organic certification to buy in the US. So
Mhm.
sometimes these opportunities will come, but you have to be ready. So thinking big is you packaging your product to meet FDA and USDA certification with nutritional label and
Mhm.
all of the necessary parts of that. And
Right.
then starting small is you saying, even though I'm thinking that one day I will be exporting to the USA, but starting small is you having a social media account and sharing testimonials of your product. Let people see the pictures of your product, selling your product to one, two, three buyers, listing your product on e-commerce platform. That is starting small. And scaling fast is you now seeing an opportunity asking for vanilla, but even though here you are, you've never exported before, but here you are attending event like this, so you can learn the rudiments of how to export without getting into problem because you haven't done it before. So thank you, Ken, for saying that. We could stay on this fact and continue on and on and on, but I'm sure you all get the gist. Now, Okumu said, thank you all, one, for the challenge, African coffee. Okay, what can African countries do to develop globally acceptable brand? Globally acceptable brand. Ken, do you want to take that? What can
Sure.
African?
Absolutely. I think Kenya is already doing that. Much of Starbucks' coffee, a lot of that comes from Kenya. So they're certainly meeting. Starbucks is a pretty ubiquitous company in the United States. They're all over the United States, right? And I know that they source quite a bit of their coffee and I believe teas from Kenya. But for somebody that is smaller and they don't know what to do, always when you do value chain, you're always looking at what the end consumer is. So if you're intervening on the, let's just say, just the roasting component of cocoa beans, right, then you want to know who is the buyer of roasted cocoa beans, right? Then you need to connect with them. How do you want it roasted? What are your preferences? Right? So that is a critical component that people don't do. You can't just make a product and then push it out to the market because the market might not want it. So you have to be cognizant of what is expected of the product. So, for example, if you look at cocoa beans, right? I think Hershey's once there's slightly has a slightly burnt, longer roasting to their because then it impacts the output, the actual chocolate, the taste of the chocolate. Some other chocolatiers would say, no, I don't want mine as slightly burnt like that. I want it less roasted or just mildly roasted. But if you understand what is needed for the next stage of that intervention, then you're on the right path. So that's one thing. Then the other thing, you alluded to that, Benga, which is you need to ensure that you are meeting all of the United States or European or whatever place you're going, their standards for import. Because if, for example, they find a little bit of microbe in something that is coming in, the whole thing gets thrown out. And that could be a significant and a devastating loss. So sometimes they might be very specific. It needs to be processed or roasted to this degree for this amount of time, etc. That requires obviously doing your homework, doing your research, but you want to make sure that you don't run afoul of regulatory compliance related issue on the one hand, but then you also want to make sure on the private side that the people you sell to, be it Hershey, be it Mars, be it whatever chocolate company, that you understand what their needs are, what their requirements are before you embark on doing it.
Thank you, Ken. So thank you so much for that. So I'm going to go quickly through these comments here. So Christopher is saying uh, we should just find alternatives to achieving this. But I'm here to announce to you that a lot of people are doing just that. Most of the exporters right now, they're just trying to figure it out, like yourself. So we cannot wait for the government, and the opportunities out there even without the government.
Yes.
So, but yeah, by being at the right places, we have a hub, almost 600 people who are professionals in the export import space. We have people like Ken Johnson with a lot of experience. We have a lot of consultant professionals who are not always just going to be asking for money. Many of them just want to share their knowledge, like Ken is doing right now. So, yes, we agree with you. And that's why we're having events like this. And to Gideon's point, is asking if an individual can export his or her raw materials to international markets without government investors and intervention. Example like cocoa and cashew. Absolutely. A lot of private sectors are doing just that. So you can, and like we had said before, you have to think big, right? You have to start small and you have to scale fast. That's exactly the whole idea. By staying connected with people like Ken and myself and the network that we represent. All right. So because of time,
May I just
sure,
interrupt just say
sure.
one thing, just so that we're clear on without any, when you say any government, are you referring to just African governments or the U.S. government? Because again, if you're going to export something into the United States, right, then there are requirements and rules. So you have to deal with the government on that level. But if you're saying that some African governments are not necessarily helpful to the process, yes, you can bypass them and you can get your product to the United States. But be mindful that there are requirements and regulations around what can be, or not so much what can be exported, imported to the United States, but how, what hygiene related issues that you need to take care of, but you need to be cognizant of what the rules and regulations are to export into the country that you're exporting to. That would be my only caveat.
Thank you, Ken. Absolutely. I want to assume this person who asked the question is an African, but there is a lot of support for U.S. businesses looking to export to Africa. Even with that, if you selling to a U.S. company or a US company is selling to you, the US government still has some programs that secures that transaction by still you not paying everything by you not paying everything for that product that you're buying from the US, right? So that type of opportunity is available to US exporters, and these are the things we want African government to look into and reverse engineer. So I'm also going to be sharing some introductions here. Okay, Mabong Matlo, thank you. So he's doing the whole value chain from farm to pocket. I like that. So that's exactly what we're saying. But where are you selling your product right now? Have you been able to get it beyond the continent? Now we're not saying that the ultimate should be uh,
Right.
United States. There are a lot of intra-African opportunities, especially with the African continental free trade, and you do not have to pay so much on logistics or stress out on many things. So those are also low-hanging fruit
Yeah.
that every one of you should be looking at. If you're in Nigeria, why not see how to get your product to Ghana? If you're in Ghana, why not see how to get your product to Cameroon? On and on and on. So there's a whole lot of intra-African opportunity as well that we also have to look at. Um, Red oil production. So there's some questions here that we cannot deal with into detail, but we encourage you if you go to trade.usafricahub.com, trade, many of you are already in that space, but if you're not, you should go into that space and join, become a member of that organization, and then we can be able to help you, right? So I'm going to share on the screen trade.usafricahub.com. All right. Okay, I see someone is looking for commodity. Okay, so Margaret, again, if anyone wants to work with you on the platform, they can do just that. But we encourage you to come into the hub. The hub is where we regulate and we guide so you don't fall into the wrong ends, and we can help you manage the conversation. So come into the hub, trade.usafricahub.com, become a member for free, and then we can take it from there. I've got a Duns and Brad's number. I'm trying to get my identify. Yeah, Christopher, contact my organization. Your Duns and Bradstreet number is the first step to getting your FDA approval. But you started in the right path, but you still have one or two things to get done. Reach out to my organization. We would be able to guide you. Again, trade.usafricahub.com. You can also follow this YouTube channel. Make sure you follow me. This is my private YouTube channel. Follow me so that when I release videos or have guests like this come on the show, you will be able to get that notification. I'm going to be asking Ken. Okay, so Christopher is responding back to your question. So he's referring to African government emphasis on the trade desk issue at the embassy. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
That's exactly what he also said.
Right.
Um, all right. I think someone else says
Bingo.
saltwater fish to the USA. Okay. Before we wrap this up, we have just 9 more minutes to go. Um, I'm just going to quickly ask Ken one more question. So, for someone listening to this webinar, everybody's thanking you. They're grateful for the nuggets. What would be your parting word? What would you tell those who are they already have products, but they're looking to scale outside of their country, or they don't even have a product yet? They're looking to building their product, or they're actually in the USA, but they're looking to tapping into the value chain opportunity. What would you say to them
Okay.
um, as actionable steps?
Okay. Before I answer that, let me just quickly, because I did see two times. I think somebody called Rosine. She had a question which flashed across my screen twice. I just want to make sure we just take a
What's the
few seconds.
name? What's the
Rosine.
name? Oh,
I think it's
Rosine.
Rosi. Yes, this is her, Rosine. Right? And I think her issue was something regarding palm oil, exactly that. So let me just take a few seconds to.
How to expand my customer base in red oil production. A question is my
Okay,
personal challenge is on how to expand my customer base
right.
in red oil production.
Now, okay, so just a quick, I just want to just hit a couple of notes on that. Now, red oil pretty much is consumed. I mean, I think there are two kinds, right? There's one that's edible, and I think the other one is more industrial. So again, we'd have to determine whether it's edible kind. If it's edible kind, there are lots of, for example, lots and lots of markets in the United States. A lot of West Africans and Central Africans who use palm oil, as they call it, palm oil, in the cooking for cooking purposes, and it's very valuable. And so the packaging of it would be very important. And if that can be packaged nicely, right? And then yeah, then there are outlets like Walmart. There are outlets like those that you could Trader Joe's if it's organic. So there are lots of outlets that later on we can get into and show you how that could be done. But as a value chain expert, and what I also say is if you have access to the other palm oil goes into the production of paint, of cosmetics, of lipstick, of a whole host of products. But if you can then process that, I believe it's oiling and soiling, right? If you can process it to that next level, because they don't want the red palm oil itself. Again, this is where value chains come in. If you can process that to the next level, then you'll be up to the races and you'll be doing very well from a financial standpoint. Okay, so I just wanted to just make sure I responded to Rosine. So back to your questions, Benga. I think that if you have somebody who has not started, right? I'm just kind of just saying, okay, I hear what he's telling me. I like it. It makes sense. I want to do it. So the first question you got to ask yourself, it's easier to do business in the country that you reside. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it outside. Sometimes it's better to do it outside. But the easiest path would be, okay, what products does my country have in which this country enjoys a competitive advantage? Uh, if it's Cote d'Ivoire, it's cocoa beans. It is, and I believe they're the second or third largest producer of cashew, for example, right? Um, let's just use those two as an example. So it's okay, well, let me train my thoughts on those two commodities, okay? And then so the next step is what goes, how is it exported now? Okay, in most cases, it's probably there's no value addition, that's happening. So how do I add value to it? Okay, you add, okay, the next level is again roasting. Okay, fine. So how can I buy cocoa beans from the farmers and then begin to roast it? Right? What technology do I need? How can I raise the capital to do it? Now, if I'm then going to export that to Switzerland or the United States, what are they looking for? How, let me contact them. Let me know what they're looking for. And it's very possible that because they are the off takers from you, they might also be interested in helping you to finance the product that you want to export to them. And you can bring them into that process as well. Because if you were to do that, it helps them in a couple of ways. They now have a direct seller that is going to be meeting their specific needs, but it's also going to improve the brand equity of that big Swiss company. Because I've written a couple of articles and I call on the fact that if you're a big company and you're helping African farmers or African, manufacturers, then, in the world of social media, the reputation of your company enhances dramatically. And an enhanced reputation of a Western company is very good to their brand, and it's also very good to their share.
Thank you so much, Ken. I know you can go on and on and on. This is very interesting topic. I just want to thank you for sharing your heart, and you can see people have been thanking you here as well. So, if you would like to connect with Ken is part of the hub. You can come to trade.usafricahub.com. You can search for him. He's right there. You can engage with him. You can talk with him. And so, remember what he said, the golden nugget. Okay, think big, start small, and scale fast. Think big, start small, and scale fast. So, ladies and gentlemen, on this note, we would like to draw the curtain. You can see that some incredible insights were shared today by Ken and myself. And so, Ken, I want to thank you again for sharing your knowledge. And for those of you who ask questions, we just want to thank you as well. We try to do this once a month. How do we come up with the topic? We listen to you in the hub. So if you would like for us to speak on a particular topic or area, come inside the hub, trade.usafricahub.com, then be part of our community as well. For those of you who would like to join our events, we have the US Africa Business Week coming up in September in New York. Again, all of this information is available inside the home. So it's been an enlightening discussion. Again, thanks to Ken for your wisdom. Thank you as well to our audience for tuning in and for being so interactive. We hope you found this session insightful and enlightening. And so, thanks again. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. And until next time, it's me, Benga Mutayo, asking you to be inspired to succeed. Take care and bye now.
Bye bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ken.